I can't. I can't do this.
Shh. It's okay, baby. I'm right here.
Please, have a seat.
300 people watched her fall. Not trip, not stumble. Fall. The kind of fall that starts in the chest and moves downward, when your heart drops first and your knees follow because there's nothing left to stand on. She was wearing a white dress that took 4 months to make. Hand-stitched lace along the neckline. A cathedral train that stretched 8 feet behind her. Her mother's pearl earrings. Her grandmother's bracelet. She had spent 3 hours in a chair getting her hair woven into a crown of braids that made her look like Ghanaian royalty. And she was standing at the altar, alone. The groom's side was full. 200 of his family and friends. Suits and dresses and perfume and programs with both their names printed in gold. But the groom was not there. The pastor had checked his watch 4 times, and the bridesmaids were whispering. The maid of honor had already called his phone, twice. Both times it went straight to voicemail. 15 minutes late became 30. 30 became 45. And then someone's phone buzzed in the third pew. Then another phone. Then another. A ripple of screens lighting up. A wave of blue-white light moving through the church like a cold wind. The best man stood up. He walked to the altar. He whispered something in the pastor's ear. The pastor closed his eyes. The best man turned to her. His face told her everything before his mouth opened. "He's not coming." 3 words. She didn't scream. She didn't speak. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers and hit the marble floor, white roses scattering like teeth knocked loose. Her knees buckled. And her cathedral train pooled around her like a surrender flag. And she went down, slowly, completely, in front of every person she had ever loved and every person she had ever wanted to impress. Her mother caught her, dropped to the floor beside her, held her daughter's face against her chest and rocked her like she was 5 years old again. 300 people watched. Nobody moved. That was 10 years ago. If you're new here, this is Fate and Folktales, where every story carries a lesson and fate never forgets. If you believe that the woman on the floor always gets back up, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and stay with me. Because this one is going to make you stand up and cheer. Last Tuesday, a man knocked on an office door on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Miami, and he was wearing a borrowed suit. His resume was printed on regular paper, not the expensive kind. His shoes were clean but old. His hands were shaking. He was there for a job interview. Junior project manager, entry level. The kind of job he would have laughed at 10 years ago. The assistant opened the door and led him through a hallway lined with architectural renderings and awards. Glass walls, ocean views, the logo on every surface. Achebe Development Group. One of the fastest-growing real estate firms in South Florida. 200 employees. 300 million in active projects. A company built from nothing by a woman whose name was spoken with reverence in every boardroom from Miami to Manhattan. He didn't know her name. He hadn't looked up the CEO. He just needed a job, any job, and this one had called him back. And the assistant stopped at a frosted glass door at the end of the hall. She knocked twice. A voice from inside said, "Send him in." The door opened. He walked in. And the woman sitting behind the desk looked up at him with eyes he hadn't seen in 10 years. She didn't stand. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a cruel smile. The smile of a woman who had spent 10 years building a life so far above him that his arrival at her door was not a threat. It was proof. "Please," she said, "have a seat." His hands started shaking. But to understand why that chair felt like a trap door, you have to go back. Back to the church floor. Back to the woman who fell. And the man who made her fall. Her name was Adaora Achebe. She grew up in a small apartment in Liberty City, Miami. And her mother, a Cameroonian immigrant named Patience, cleaned hotel rooms at the Fontainebleau for 23 years. Her father left when she was 4. She never knew him. She never needed to. Patience raised Adaora with 2 rules. 1. Never let a man define your worth. 2. Build something that belongs to you so you never have to beg anyone for a roof. Adaora listened. She was quiet, but relentless. Graduated top of her class at Miami Central. Full scholarship to Florida International University. Studied architecture. Graduated with honors. Got a job at a mid-sized development firm in Brickell. She was good. Not just competent, visionary. She could look at a vacant lot and see a building. She could look at a neighborhood and see its future. And her boss told her she had the eye, the rare ability to see value where others saw nothing. But Adaora wasn't just building a career, she was building a life. And that life, for a while, included a man named Kweku Darko. Kweku was charming, 6'1", athlete's build, a smile that could unlock any door. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, good money, flexible hours, expensive tastes. He drove a leased BMW. He wore watches he couldn't quite afford. He talked about the future like it was a movie he was starring in. He met Adaora at a friend's birthday party. He walked straight to her, past every other woman in the room, and said, "I don't know who you are, but I know I'm supposed to." She should have heard the rehearsal in that line. She didn't. They dated for 2 years. He proposed on the beach at sunset. Key Biscayne. A knee in the sand, a ring that was beautiful but financed. She said yes before he finished the question. The wedding was planned for October. 300 guests. A church in Coral Gables with stained glass windows that threw colored light across the pews. Adaora's mother made the guest favors by hand. Small bags of chin-chin tied with gold ribbon. Every detail was perfect. Every detail except the groom. What Adaora didn't know, what she wouldn't learn until years later, was that Kweku had been seeing someone else for the last 4 months of their engagement. Her name was Brittany Caldwell. She was the daughter of a hotel developer. Old money, old connections, a trust fund that made Kweku's pharmaceutical salary look like pocket change. Brittany didn't know about Adaora. She thought Kweku was single, and she thought his charm was just for her. Kweku had been running both relationships simultaneously, telling Adaora he was at conferences when he was with Brittany, telling Brittany he was finding himself when he was at wedding cake tastings with Adaora. The night before the wedding, Kweku made his decision, not with his heart, with his calculator. Brittany's family was worth $40 million. Adaora's family had a 2-bedroom apartment in Liberty City and a mother who cleaned hotel rooms. He chose the money. He didn't have the spine to tell Adaora himself. He sent a text to his best man at 6 in the morning, 2 hours before the ceremony. "I can't do it. Don't tell her until she's at the altar. I'll be gone by then." The best man, a man named Yaw, who had known Kweku since college, stared at the text for 20 minutes. And he almost called Adaora directly. He should have. But loyalty to his friend, misplaced, poisonous loyalty, made him wait. And so Adaora stood at the altar, in her handmade dress, with her mother's pearls, waiting for a man who had already driven to the airport. 300 people watched her fall, and one of them, sitting in the 4th pew, watching with tears streaming down her face, was Patience Achebe, the woman who cleaned hotel rooms, the woman who raised her daughter alone, the woman who had told her daughter 2 rules for living. Patience didn't speak in the church. She waited until they were home, until the dress was hung in the closet, until the apartment was dark and Adaora was lying on her childhood bed staring at the ceiling. Then she sat on the edge of the bed. She took her daughter's hand, and she said one thing. "You are on the floor, but the floor is not your home. Get up, slow if you have to, but get up." Adaora didn't get up that night, or the next night, or the next week. But a mother's voice doesn't expire. It sits in your bones and waits. And 3 months later, it spoke again. For 3 months, Adaora didn't leave the apartment. She stopped eating properly. She stopped answering calls. She quit her job. She couldn't face people who had been at the wedding. The humiliation was a living thing that sat in every room with her. Her mother said nothing during those 3 months. She just kept leaving plates of food outside Adaora's door, kept washing her clothes, kept going to work at the Fontainebleau, cleaning rooms, making beds, folding towels, and coming home to a daughter who had stopped believing in herself. And then one morning, a Tuesday, Adaora walked into the kitchen. Patience was standing at the stove making breakfast. Adaora sat at the table. She picked up a fork. She ate. And Patience, without turning from the stove, smiled. Because she knew. The floor was over. Her daughter was getting up. What happened in the next 10 years is the kind of story that makes people believe in something bigger than luck. And it started with a vacant lot and a woman who refused to stay down. Adaora went back to work. Not to her old firm. She couldn't. She started freelancing, small projects, residential renovations, a kitchen here, a bathroom there. She charged less than she was worth because she needed the work more than the money. 6 months after the wedding, she was walking through Overtown, a historically black neighborhood in Miami that developers had been circling for years. She saw a vacant lot on the corner of Northwest 3rd Avenue, overgrown, abandoned, a chain-link fence with a rusted padlock. She stood at that fence for 45 minutes. She didn't see weeds and concrete. She saw a building, a mixed-use development, residential above, retail below, affordable housing for the community that was already there. Not displacement, investment. She had no money, no investors, no company, no reputation, not anymore. She had a vision and a mother who taught her to build things that belonged to you. She took out a loan, $47,000, everything she could qualify for. She bought the lot. She drew the plans herself. She knocked on doors, city officials, community leaders, small lenders who wouldn't laugh at a woman with a foreclosed dream and a $47,000 loan. Most of them laughed. One didn't. His name was Mr. Badu, a retired Ghanaian banker who ran a small community development fund in Little Haiti. He looked at her plans. He looked at her eyes. He saw something he recognized, the hunger of someone who has been to the bottom and is climbing with bleeding fingers. He invested $200,000. The building went up, 12 units, a small grocery on the ground floor. Every unit leased within 60 days. Adaora made her money back in 14 months. She took every dollar of profit and bought another lot. Then another. Then another. Within 3 years, she had developed 11 properties. Within 5 years, 28. Within 7 years, she incorporated a Achebe development group and moved into an office on Brickell Avenue. By year 10, the year Kweku Darko knocked on her door, Achebe Development Group was managing $300 million in active projects, 200 employees, offices in Miami and Orlando, a reputation built on a philosophy Adaora repeated in every interview she gave. Build for the people who are already there, not the people you wish were coming. She was on the cover of South Florida Business Journal. She was keynote speaker at the National Association of Real Estate Developers Conference. She was 37 years old, and she had built every brick of it herself. And she never married. Not because she was bitter, because she was busy. And because she had learned something on that church floor that most people never learn, the only foundation that never cracks is the one you pour yourself. Meanwhile, while Adaora was building an empire, the man who left her was learning what happens when you build your life on someone else's money. And the lesson was expensive. Kweku married Brittany Caldwell 3 months after leaving Adaora at the altar. Beach ceremony, Bahamas. Brittany's father paid for everything. The honeymoon was in the Maldives. The house was in Coral Gables, a wedding gift from the Caldwell Family Trust. For 3 years, Kweku lived the life he thought he deserved. Country clubs, dinner parties, a Mercedes that was actually paid for, not leased. And he quit his pharmaceutical job because Brittany said it was beneath their lifestyle. He became a consultant, which meant he played golf and attended lunches. Then the Caldwell money started drying up. Brittany's father made a series of bad investments. Hotels that didn't fill, developments that stalled, a lawsuit from a former partner that ate through the family's reserves. The trust fund that Kweku had married into was hemorrhaging. Brittany blamed Kweku, not for the money, for being useless. He had no career, no skills, no hustle. He had been living off her family's wealth for 3 years and had nothing to show for it except a golf handicap and a closet full of shirts he didn't buy. They fought, constantly, loudly. The Coral Gables house, the wedding gift, was sold to cover debts. They moved to a rental in Kendall, and the Mercedes was traded for a Honda. Year 5, Brittany filed for divorce. The settlement was brutal. Kweku walked away with almost nothing because he had brought almost nothing. No career, no savings, no company, no plan. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Hialeah. He applied for pharmaceutical sales jobs, but the industry had moved on. Nobody wanted a 40-year-old with a 5-year gap on his resume and no references except, "I was married to a rich woman." He sold watches to make rent, then shoes, then nothing. By year 9, Kweku Darko was broke. Truly broke. The kind of broke where you count the days until rent is due and the nights until your phone gets cut off. The borrowed BMW was gone. The leased watches were gone. The charm was still there, but charm without money is just noise. He started applying for anything. Retail, warehouse, administrative assistant. He applied for 47 jobs in 1 month, got 3 callbacks, no offers. Then, on a Tuesday, he saw a listing online. Junior project manager, Achabe Development Group, Miami, entry level, no experience required. He didn't recognize the name. He didn't Google the company. He just clicked apply and attached his resume and went back to watching television in a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like the takeout containers he couldn't afford to throw away because the dumpster was too far to walk to in the heat. 2 weeks later, his phone rang. "Mr. Darko, this is the assistant to the CEO of Achabe Development Group. We'd like to schedule you for an interview." Kweku closed his eyes. Thank God. Finally. Someone called back. "Yes, absolutely. When?" "Tuesday at 10 a.m. 42nd floor. Please bring 2 forms of ID and a printed copy of your resume." "I'll be there." He hung up. He pressed the phone against his forehead. He took a deep breath. He had no idea what floor he was about to walk onto, but fate did. And fate had been holding this appointment for 10 years. Adaora didn't plan this. That's the part people never believe when they hear the story. She wasn't tracking Kweku. She wasn't searching for him. She wasn't plotting revenge. She had genuinely moved on, not in the way people say they've moved on while checking their ex's social media at midnight. Actually moved on, built a life, built a company, built a version of herself that the woman on the church floor wouldn't recognize. But when her assistant brought in the stack of applications for the junior project manager position and she was flipping through them on a Thursday afternoon between meetings, she saw the name, Kweku Darko. She stopped flipping. She stared at the name. She read it again. She read his resume, the pharmaceutical sales job from a decade ago, the 5-year gap, the nothing that followed. She set the resume down. She picked up her water glass. She took a slow sip. She set it down. Then she told her assistant to schedule him for Tuesday at 10. Not for revenge, not for humiliation, for something she couldn't name yet. Something between closure and curiosity, and the quiet, unshakable knowledge that fate has a sense of timing that no human can replicate. She just wanted to see his face, sitting across from her desk, in her office. On the 42nd floor of the building she built from a vacant lot and a $47,000 loan. She wanted to see if he recognized her, and she wanted to see what she would feel when he did. Tuesday came the way Tuesdays always come. Ordinary for everyone except the people whose lives are about to change. And what happened on the 42nd floor that morning would prove that fate has a memory longer than any grudge. Adaora arrived at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the interview. She sat at her desk and looked out at the ocean. The Miami skyline stretched beneath her, cranes and construction sites, half of them hers. The morning light was golden and warm through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She wore a tailored ivory suit, structured shoulders, clean lines, a silk blouse the color of champagne underneath, and her mother's pearl earrings, the same ones she had worn at the wedding. She wore them on purpose, not as a wound, as a reminder of where she started, of what she survived. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, low bun, sophisticated, powerful. No crown of braids today. That was the girl. This was the woman. On her desk, his resume. 1 page, thin, the thinnest story she had ever read. At 9:55, her assistant buzzed. "Ms. Achebe, your 10 o'clock is here. Give me 2 minutes, then send him in." She used the 2 minutes to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Not because she was nervous, because she wanted to be fully present for whatever was about to happen. The door opened, and Kweku Darko walked into her office. He looked different. Of course he looked different. 10 years will do that. And the athlete's build was softer. The jaw that once looked chiseled now looked tired. The eyes that used to sparkle with rehearsed charm were dim and cautious. The eyes of a man who has been told no 47 times in a month. He was wearing a borrowed navy suit, slightly too big in the shoulders. A white shirt, clean but not pressed. Black shoes, polished but cracking at the toe. He held a manila folder with his printed resume inside, the regular paper, not the expensive kind. He walked to the chair across from her desk. He sat down. He placed the folder on his lap. He looked up, and he saw her face. Not immediately. The first thing he saw was the office, the glass, the ocean view, the awards, the renderings, the scale models. His eyes moved across the room with the wide, hungry look of a man who was seeing everything he didn't have. Then his eyes reached the desk, the nameplate. Adaora Achebe, CEO. Then his eyes reached the woman behind it, and the room stopped. His mouth opened. His hands, already shaking, went completely still. The manila folder slid from his lap and hit the floor, his resume pages scattered across the polished concrete. "Ada." She let the name hang in the air for 3 seconds. "It's Ms. Achebe, actually. Please, sit." He didn't move. He couldn't. His body had disconnected from his brain. He was staring at her the way a man stares at a car coming toward him, frozen in the headlights of something he can't outrun. "Kweku, sit down." He sat, or rather, he collapsed into the chair. His spine curved, his shoulders fell. And the borrowed suit that was already too big now looked enormous on him, a man shrinking inside his own clothes. I didn't know." "I know you didn't. If you had, you wouldn't have come." He swallowed. His Adam's apple moved visibly. His eyes were darting, to the door, to the windows, to the floor where his resume was scattered, looking for an exit, a rewind button, a version of this moment where he wasn't sitting across from the woman he had left on a church floor 10 years ago. Adaora leaned back in her chair. She folded her hands on the desk. Her pearl earrings caught the morning light. The same pearls, the same light, a different woman. "You look like you've had a hard few years," she said. He said nothing. "I read your resume, pharmaceutical sales, then a 5-year gap, then nothing." He still said nothing. His jaw was working, muscles flexing, lips pressing together, but no words came. "I'm going to tell you something, Kweku, and I want you to listen. Not because you owe me, you do. But that's not why. Because what I'm about to say is the only useful thing you'll hear this year." He looked at her. Really looked. For the first time in the conversation, his eyes stopped darting and settled on hers. 10 years ago, You left me on a church floor, in front of 300 people, in a dress that took 4 months to make, with my mother's pearls in my ears and my grandmother's bracelet on my wrist. You didn't call. You didn't text me. You texted your best man. You disappeared because a woman with a bigger bank account made the math work better in your head. Her voice was steady, not rising, not breaking, and every word placed like a tile in a mosaic, each one essential, none wasted. And for 3 months after that, I didn't leave my apartment. I didn't eat. I didn't work. I didn't answer the phone. I lay on a bed and stared at a ceiling and tried to figure out what was so wrong with me that a man I loved would rather vanish than marry me. Kweku's eyes were filling, not with the performative tears of a man looking for sympathy, with the real, helpless tears of a man who is hearing the damage report of something he broke a decade ago. But here's what you didn't know, Kweku. Here's the part that changes the story. She leaned forward. You didn't break me. You freed me. The room was completely still. When you left, you took the version of me that needed a man to feel complete, and the version that measured her worth by whether someone showed up at the altar. You took her, and you left behind the version that had nothing, no man, no plan, no money, no pride, and had to build everything from the ground up. She gestured at the office, the glass, the ocean, the skyline, the 200 employees on the floors below. This is what I built from that church floor. Not because of you, in spite of you. Every building you see out that window, I drew the plans. Every contract, every negotiation, every vacant lot that nobody else saw value in, that was me, on my knees, with bleeding fingers, building. She paused. Her pearl earrings caught the light again. You chose Brittany because her family had $40 million. And now you're sitting in my office, in a borrowed suit, applying for a junior position at a company worth $300 million, a company that didn't exist 10 years ago, a company that exists because you left me on that floor. The silence in the room was total, the kind of silence that has weight, that presses on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Kweku's hands were gripping the armrests of the chair. Tears were falling, dropping onto the borrowed suit, darkening the fabric. His mouth was open, but whatever he wanted to say had dissolved somewhere between his brain and his tongue. I'm not going to give you this job, Kweku. He nodded. A small, defeated nod. He expected that. Not because I'm punishing you, because you're not qualified. You have no project management experience, no development background. I know skills that match this position. I would be doing you a disservice, and disrespecting my team, by hiring you out of pity or revenge. She reached into her desk drawer. She pulled out a business card. She placed it on the desk and slid it toward him. This is a man named Mr. Badu. He runs a community development fund in Little Haiti. 15 years ago, when I was standing at a chain-link fence with nothing but a vision and a $47,000 loan, he was the only person who didn't laugh at me. He invests in people, not resumes. Call him. Tell him I sent you. He'll listen. Kweku looked at the card. He didn't touch it. Why would you help me? Adaora looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Because my mother taught me 2 things. Never let a man define your worth, and build something that belongs to you. She didn't teach me a 3rd rule about holding grudges. That's not a building I'm interested in constructing. She stood. She buttoned her suit jacket. The interview was over. Kweku reached down with trembling hands and gathered his scattered resume pages from the floor. He stood. The borrowed suit hung on him like a question mark. He picked up the business card. He held it like it might dissolve. Ada, Ms. Achebe, Don't say you're sorry. Sorry is a word for people who accidentally step on your foot. What you did was deliberate. You chose. And I chose too. I chose to get up. We both have to live with our choices. She walked him to the door. She opened it. He stepped through. And just before the door closed, he turned back. And he looked at her one more time, at the ivory suit, the pearl earrings, the woman who had been on the floor and was now on the 42nd floor, and his face collapsed completely. Not a cry. A reckoning. The face of a man seeing, clearly, finally, 10 years too late, exactly what he threw away. The door closed. Adaora stood behind it for 4 seconds. She closed her eyes. She took one breath. Then she opened her eyes, walked back to her desk, sat down, and opened the next file. She had buildings to build. That evening, Adaora drove to Liberty City. She parked outside the apartment where she grew up. The same building, the same cracked steps, the same mailbox with Achibi written in her mother's handwriting on a piece of tape that had been there for 30 years. She walked up the stairs. She knocked on the door. Patience opened it. 71 years old now. Retired from the Fontainebleau last year. Adaora had made sure of that. Silver hair in a wrap, house dress, reading glasses on a chain, the same strong, quiet face that had held a broken bride on a church floor. "Mama." "Come in, child. I made chin-chin." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Adaora had picked up a fork after 3 months of darkness, the same table where everything started over. "He came to my office today." Patience looked up from the chin-chin. Her reading glasses caught the kitchen light. "Kweku?" "He applied for a job. He didn't know it was my company." Patience was quiet for a moment. Then, "What did you do?" "I told him the truth. About the floor. About what I built. About why he's not qualified." She paused. "And I gave him Mr. Badu's card." Patience stared at her daughter. Her eyes filled, slowly, the way a river rises. "You gave him help. You taught me not to build grudges, Mama. I'm not going to start now." Patience reached across the table. She took her daughter's hand, the same hand she had held on the church floor, the same hand that had signed $300 million in development contracts, the same hand. "Your father left when you were 4. Kweku left at the altar. And still, my daughter builds. She doesn't burn." Adaora squeezed her mother's hand. "I had a good teacher." They sat together, mother and daughter, chin-chin on the table, the kitchen light warm and golden, the apartment small and perfect. Outside, the Miami skyline glittered, cranes moving, buildings rising, half of them Adaora's. And somewhere in Hialeah, a man in a borrowed suit sat on the edge of a bed and stared at a business card, turning it over in his fingers, reading the name, feeling the weight of the smallest chance he had ever been given. He didn't deserve it. But the woman who gave it to him had never been interested in what people deserve. She was interested in what people build. And that, more than the office, more than the skyline, more than the $300 million, was why she won. Not because she destroyed the man who destroyed her, but because she outgrew him so completely that destroying him wasn't even necessary. He was already small. She didn't make him smaller. She just let him see how tall she had become. And then she went home and ate chin-chin with her mother. Adaora Achebe understood something most people never learn. Revenge is a building with no foundation. It looks impressive, but it collapses the moment you stop holding it up. But growth? Growth is bedrock. It doesn't need your attention to stand. It doesn't need an audience. It just stands, quietly, permanently. The way a woman stands when she's spent 10 years pouring her own foundation. One lot, one building, one refusal to stay on the floor at a time. Kweku left her at the altar because he thought she was nothing. He sat across her desk 10 years later and learned she was everything. And the cruelest part, the part that will keep him awake for years, is that she didn't need him to know. She already knew. She'd known since the morning she picked up that fork. If you want to see who fate visits next, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because in these stories, the people who leave you on the floor always forget one thing. Floors are where foundations start. And some women, Some women build empires on the exact spot where they fell.